Well, thanks for coming, everybody. This is OC Thinkers, and tonight's topic is resisting authoritarian structures in politics and organizing. We've got Rich Procida with us and Lisa Snow, and my name is Rhett Kozeski. I'm the facilitator, and I'm just going to take you through a few slides here, and we'll kind of turn it over to Rich and Lisa to get started. So what is OC Thinkers? So obviously, welcome for coming. And this has been going on for quite a few years now. I've just taken this over within the last year, maybe a little bit more. I can't even remember, lost track of time. But this is a place where people can come together with different viewpoints, share ideas, discuss issues, apply the tools of critical thinking. I really try to stress that, to really try to be as unbiased as possible, really use the tools of critical thinking. And we cover a lot of different controversial topics. And if you look back through our history, which actually some of it's not there because the other group actually got disbanded, but we've covered everything: politics, religion, any topic that's controversial, we've probably covered it at one point in the past. And we're always looking for guest speakers. Rich and Lisa obviously are my guest speakers today, but we're always looking for topics and ideas. One of our members posted, hey, let's talk about, I can't remember what it was now. I think it was forgiveness. And so I did a series on that because she was the only one that got back to me with a topic. So feel free to post ideas for us. And of course, we're always looking for feedback. So let me know things that we can improve for future. And obviously, welcome newcomers. If it's the first time you've been with OC Thinkers, I'd love to have you. Feel free to stay in touch. Obviously, join our meetup page and send me a message or email, and I can put you on an email list for some other meetups that you might be interested in. So other than that, my general goal is, why do I do this? I love to search for the truth, find truth. I consider myself a truth seeker forever. I like to learn new things, influence positive change, build a tolerance, and tolerance on a positive side, not just tolerance, oh, I hate you, but I tolerate you, but build more positive tolerance than negative. I believe we are in a complex world, and we do need to coexist. We need to learn how to get together, understand each other. I love to break stereotypes and debunk myths, try to get to the truth of the matter. And the biggest thing I want to emphasize here is the diversity of the group. Traditionally, we have, Christians, non-Christians, and sometimes Muslims join. So we've got a fairly wide range of religious diversity. And then when I did a 4-part series on politics, we actually had several Trump supporters join us. So we've got probably Democrats, Republicans, maybe some independents. So we typically, sometimes we get a large diversity of political views as well, and that's my goal. So just keep that in mind when you're sharing and discussing. And just one quick, I got one more slide kind of related to that, but I did want to point out this advertisement first. Lisa Peterson is currently running. She heads up the Poor People's Campaign, and she's actually started an anti-racism book club. I think most of this stuff is current. She's got 2 meetup sites there. She's got her phone number and her email. But if you're interested in this, actually maybe just reach out to me, because the books club is already almost getting ready to start, and the groups are already forming. So if you have any interest in this, maybe just shoot me a message in the Zoom, and I can get you some more information and some more details. But on the lines of anti-racism, just to kind of get the juices flowing and thinking a little bit, I did want to start with just a couple of myths and comments that I've heard recently related to social justice. So obviously, unless you've been living in a cave, you've been hearing a lot of information on the news about the protests, and there's been a few riots and a lot of media attention given to Black Lives Matter. And I've been on Twitter quite a bit, and I've seen just a lot of stereotypes and myths being thrown out there. And just one that I wanted to bring to your attention. You guys are probably already aware of this, but this is just a great comeback for people who say, well, Black Lives Matter, all lives matter, and they kind of get into this competition. So clearly, Black Lives Matter is not saying that all lives don't matter. They're just simply drawing attention to the issue of racism. So that's just kind of like their main goal, right? So, and to think about it, all lives can't matter until Black Lives Matter. So the two obviously work together. So there's no hidden agenda here. So yeah, I just throw that out there if you see anybody that's protesting that. And if you do fall in a different ideological perspective, and you have some issues with Black Lives Matter, you really need to be careful when you protest. I mean, no group is beyond, critique or criticism, but I'm finding that a lot of people are maybe annoyed by the movement or whatever. And almost every tweet that I've seen against Black Lives Matter clearly comes across as racist. So if you don't want to appear racist, you may want to just, if you don't have anything nice to say, maybe don't say anything at all. But I've kind of followed these tweets, and they don't just appear racist. I mean, they pretty clearly are racist, and not just stereotype, but every person that's posted this stuff, I follow them back to their main page. And it's, I don't think it's a coincidence. Again, I'm not trying to overgeneralize or stereotype, but they have been Trump supporters. So a couple of times I've, grilled people in the past when we were doing the 4-part series on politics. Some people were overgeneralizing, saying, well, all Trump supporters are racist, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, that's too overgeneralized. But they're certainly not making good names for themselves, because like I've only looked at, maybe a couple dozen tweets, but every one is kind of pointing back to that. So definitely, be careful with that. And then another quick thing about bias versus informed bias. The last time Rich and Lisa joined us, we had a couple people just exploding the chat with pretty much propaganda. And it was ironic because it was actually a presentation on propaganda. And questions and comments came in there about, bias and stuff like that. We're not trying to pretend to not have opinions here. I mean, once I introduce Rich here in a minute, he's a progressive, I'm a progressive, we lean towards, the Democrat, but we're just trying to have a discussion about this. And I loved it when we had the diversity. I loved learning from the Trump supporters, what made them click. Why do you believe what you believe? Why did you vote for him? So I want to keep that dialogue healthy, and just keep in mind that there's kind of a technical word, bias, which actually means that you kind of ignore the opposition opinion, but there's more general term, bias just meaning I'm an informed bias. I've done some studies, I've made a decision on what I believe. So just keep those two in balance a bit. And then, generally we're nonpartisan. Obviously we do have opinions though. So we're not trying to hide any of that either. So just keep that in mind. So I haven't had to share this too much in the past, but just a couple discussion guidelines. I'm just going to flip through this really quick. Again, my goal is for people to think critically about some of these topics that Rich and Lisa bring up, and think about active listening as Rich, guides us through this discussion. Really listen before you make a comment. Sometimes you'll see that person just waiting to react before they've even listened to the entire, message that what's being said. So practice your active listening. Try not to monopolize. Give people, give each person, time to take the turn. And then again, try not to overgeneralize. Try to speak from experience. Like, well, this is what I've experienced, or this is what I've seen. For example, the 12 or more tweets that I saw against Black Lives Matter, pointed back to a Trump supporter, and they were certainly racist comments. So that was not saying that all Trump supporters are racist, but just my limited experience with those tweets were, kind of not making them look too good. Try not to interrupt each other. Again, we're not going to force everybody to stay on mute, but let people finish making their comment before you jump in with yours. But it's okay to challenge each other, but respectfully. We don't have to all be, politically correct here, but just be respectful. And try to work towards a shared understanding. I love to learn about what other people are thinking and why they think the way they do. So with those things said, let me introduce Rich. Rich is an author, an attorney, and a journalist, and he is part of the Bible Study for Progressives. He can introduce himself a little bit more than that if he has some more stuff to share. And then we have Lisa Snow with us. She's a media psychology specialist, and they were both with us a month or so ago. And I really enjoyed having them back. So Rich, go ahead and take it away.
All right, thank you. So, so this is what I've decided to do is make this a discussion. So if you might want to have, if you don't have any noises, you might want to keep your mic off or keep your trigger finger on the mic button and hop in with comments. I'm going to try and see if I can keep track of the chat. So one thing we can do is raise hands. And if I do that, there's a participant little button down there Hey, we are up to 25 now. So if you click the participants, a screen should open up, and you can, and on the bottom, where is it that we're, raise hand. Where is raising hand on this? I guess it's not on mine, but it's probably on yours. And I'll try and keep a track on that. It should show me here. But Lisa's going to help me with that too, I think. So hopefully it'll work out. I don't know how well it's going to work. My name's Rich Procida. I'm an attorney and author and journalist. I write for laprogressive.com, and I also produce a podcast called Bible Study for Progressives to show where moderates, liberals, and leftists of all faiths and ideologies come together to discuss scripture, spirituality, and politics. And so I do a lot of politics-only shows on that. So it's kind of a news and politics podcast, and sometimes it's Bible studies, but it's really mostly what I'm into. So, but this Bible Studies for Progressives is also sponsoring this event. And I've been writing a lot about propaganda and the effect on the election and the narratives that are coming out. And what I decided, I wrote an article called Resisting Authoritarian Structures in Politics and Organizing. So what I'm going to do is read the article, maybe paragraph by paragraph, sentence by, or sometimes even just a sentence, and get you guys to comment and see if that works. Otherwise, we're just going to read it through and then have a discussion afterwards if it doesn't work. Lisa is a media psychology specialist. She's written a book on propaganda. She's worked on a movie, The Brainwashing of My Dad, where she was a consultant for that. So she's worked on media and the effects of propaganda and other media tricks. So, so we'll just begin. And I actually have a question for you guys. I think that there are at least 30% of Americans who believe everything Trump says. I mean, everything that Trump says. There's nothing that Trump doesn't say that they don't believe. What do you guys think about that? About right number, or more, less? We could do a poll. So, and what they believe are things that are obviously false, right? I mean, can some of you guys come up with some of the things? I mean, the things I'm think of is that, like, they have a constitutional right not to wear masks, or that climate change is a hoax, or that Obama wasn't born in this country. I think somebody had, well, these types of things that, and what basis do they have to have these beliefs? Do they have and Lisa, feel free to jump in at any time. Go ahead.
Actually, I was going to say a big one to me, and this is something that I kind of always go back to check myself, and that's that many of them believed that the economy was very much worse off under Obama after 8 years than when he took office. And I saw that kind of evolve. And the reason is, people may not have been happy with the economy after 8 years. I understand that. But when Obama took office, I was working at a large corporation, getting economic forecasts, and he literally took office when the economy was off the cliff. And the leading economists didn't even know when it was going to bottom out as he was taking office, because they didn't know what he was going to do and what was going to happen next. That's how bad it was, right? But into October, they would swear that it was worse off than when he took office, which was just factually inaccurate. When they looked at the numbers, they would say the numbers didn't represent, or they were lies, right? And here's the thing. There's that element, but here's the amazing thing. November and December, when those very same reporting offices reported numbers as they had been doing, I was paying attention to this because I thought, what's going to happen, right? When he won. So when those very same reporting offices, those departments reported numbers in November and December, before he even took office, he claimed that they were because he got elected. And I thought he was going to have to come up with another metric, or they were going to have to do something to say intellectually, you know, consistently, based on them saying these are all bad numbers and bogus. I was paying attention because I thought, how is he going to prove things have gotten better if these numbers are all bogus? It turned out not to be a problem. In November and December, before he took office and they reported numbers, even for October, he claimed it was because of him and his election. And the people that I saw, again, from my sampling of all the people, my understanding, they seemed to buy it 100%. And it just didn't, it didn't even matter to them. So I just check myself when we say, oh, something's going to get through. I go back to that point in time and just think, you know, for a group of people, he could say anything.
So I think we have all the video participants I can see. So all you have to do is sort of raise your hand if you want to talk. And but the people who don't have video on, they'll have to raise their hand electronically. So why do you guys think that they believe these things so easy? I mean, 30%. It's important not to because there's a lot. 70% is a lot of people, so it's not everybody. But if it's 30%, 35, 40, 25, it's still a heck of a lot of people. Why do you think that they just believe these things? Ron, go ahead, unmute yourself, Ron.
Just for a point of clarity, Rich, you're saying 25, 30% of all Americans or 25% of all conservatives believe in Trump does?
Yeah, I'm thinking, well, we've seen Trump have a solid base of around, it's been 40%, it's going down to 35. Now I assume, and this is just an estimate on my part, I mean, I wrote it in the article, but I don't have any statistical way to prove it, so that's why I'm sort of leaving it open. But some percentage of those people in his base don't believe everything he says. But how many of that base believes everything that he says? And then why? Why do they believe things that are obviously false, that we all know are obviously false? Unless they're not false, that's another opinion to have, right? I mean, are they really just that ignorant? I mean, it's really easy just to scratch our head and say, hey, look how stupid they are, right? Phil. I can't hear you, Phil. You're unmuted, but maybe your mic isn't.
Okay, how about that? Can you hear?
Sounds good. Yeah, hear you now.
Okay, I do wonder about the 30% number. I wish you did have stats on it, because there are a number of people that voted for him because of what he could do in terms of getting conservative judges in Supreme Court that have nothing to do with whether or not they believe him. So the number is certainly smaller than the 40%. But I wish I knew too. So in terms of generally why people believe, they have an interest in what he's doing. There's a lot of confirmation bias. I've talked to a number of people that are thoroughly convinced that he is sort of a good guy. He is a good business person, and they're backing that up. There's sort of a sunk cost on what they already knew. They don't want to see conflict with that. So you've got a scale that, as you go down to smaller percentages, gets less and less rational, if you will, and more rationalized. At the bottom of that scale is the most conspiracy theory laden people that will believe pretty much anything he says.
Right, and then QAnon, they have the QAnon people who believe crazy stuff as well.
Yeah.
Is it possible that they're just doing what we all do? We follow our leaders and rely on our trusted sources. I mean, they follow Donald Trump, they rely on Fox News. You know, you know, and when we do that, we make ourselves vulnerable to manipulation. If all our sources, and we just rely on those sources, without really considering other opinions. But I do it too. You know, I can't stand listening to Fox News. It increases my blood pressure. I start yelling at the TV. You know, it's all, you know, and it's not really worth me watching it. But MSNBC and CNN don't do that to me. And I think I can get some sources of information. But so they're being, go ahead, Rat.
No, let go ahead and finish your thought there if you want.
No, that's it. Go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, like from a critical thinking perspective, there are some people that just tend to follow, you know, actors, politicians, whoever, just kind of blindly. And there's a spectrum of, you know, people that accept things, just everything they do, and then some people who think just a little bit critically, and then obviously people who think a lot critically. One of the things I like to do is just take each bit of information, you know, for what it's worth, and try to analyze it and say, you know, what's the source, who it came from, what's the likelihood of this being true. And if you've ever read a book and you agreed with 100% of everything that was in that book, you know, it's possible, but you might be like, are you just, you know, was it like confirmation bias? You read something that you kind of already agreed with, and you were just so sucked into that you believed everything. I don't think there's been ever a book that I've read that I didn't at least question something, or that I had to fact check it or something. And so, like I said, full disclosure, I'm a, you know, registered Democrat. I've always voted Democrat, but I'm not a huge fan of Biden, for example. And I've heard some critical comments about Obama. And I'm like, yeah, okay, they could be right. You know, he wasn't perfect. He had some things that he maybe did wrong, and maybe they weren't brought out in the press that much. That's fine. Let's go check those things out. And I might agree with that he wasn't perfect. But to think that somebody is completely perfect is, you should make yourself wonder, right? You should be like, wow, this person can do no wrong. And it's a great example, Rich, because I won't mention any names, but I've got a family member who during the Mueller report time said basically, well, I don't really care if he did anything wrong because he's done so many good things. And I'm like, are you serious? I mean, basically just to sweep some of those results under the carpet like that without being at least critical. You can say, well, he did some things wrong, but I think he did more things right. That's an opinion. That's fine. I would accept that. But to say that I don't care if he did anything wrong because he's done so many good things, that's a red flag for everybody to consider.
Ron. You're muted still, Ron.
There we go. There's another side to this, and I know you're a registered Democrat. I'm currently a registered Republican. I thought I was registered independent, but I lean more towards the conservative side of things. There is another side to this that I think plays into this, and it's as bad as Trump is to most conservatives that I talk to. The conservatives I know have perceived, rightly or wrongly, that they've gotten punched in the face by media, when Obama came out and said those fateful words, I'm paraphrasing, they cling to their God and guns. I mean, they knew who he was targeting. It's regarded as flyover country. A lot of conservatives perceive that they've been insulted by Democrats, and they perceive that they haven't been insulted by Republicans. Now, whether that's right or wrong, I'm in this conversation because I'm trying to figure out what's right and wrong. I just think that a lot of people I talk to, excuse my French, they don't give a damn about the truth because this guy is at least on their side and he at least comes off as understanding where they're coming from. And a lot of Democrats I talk to are like, what the hell are you talking about? And I'm going, you don't get it, do you? It's a narrative that people cling to, and I think it's playing into this thing. It's playing into this thing hugely. I could say that. term that I hate. Anyway, thoughts on that?
Lisa? Who was it? Lisa had her hand up. Did you have your hand up, Simita? No. Go ahead, Lisa.
Just real quickly, that what you're talking about, and this is to tie this back into a little bit of what we were talking about with the authoritarianism. I think that what's happened is I'm going to go real quick, but it goes back to like 9/11 when Bush said, "You're with us, you're against us," and it became this polar good versus evil sort of narrative. And then the us changed over time in some people's minds, where it went from against terrorism, terrorists and non-terrorists, then the United States and the world, then Republicans versus Democrats, and then it kind of worked its way down. And when you look at who them is, them are always evil, and us is always good, and it's kind of refined us down to a really solid group of us that is supposedly good and trying to save the country. And like you said, the narrative, right? I mean, it's, and Obama's comments fed into that. This goes back a little ways. And what the reason that's important is because when you add that us versus them mentality, which can actually be stoked and increased by fear. So you'll see a lot in right-wing media about the Democrats are coming after you, they hate you, they're coming after your way of life, we have to save the country. You see a lot of that with this us versus them sort of mentality. I've got some video clips of them even years ago saying Democrats are terrorists, and making the equivalent of Democrats are terrorists, and it was believable because in their mind, them is all evil. So if you're on this them side of the equation, everybody there is evil. It's not a matter of degree. It's just everybody's evil. So equating the left to terrorism, people who want to destroy the country, becomes relatively easy. And authoritarianism is stoked by this us versus them mentality, the use of fear, and that creates a whole bunch of things like we've seen: aggression, lack of empathy, and inconsistent thinking, where people don't think consistently. They'll say two things that are both can't be true, and they don't seem to realize it. So I think that that's part of it. And then what happens with this us versus them thinking is that they take, and we all do this, if we get into this strong us versus them thinking, we will take people and comments made from somebody in our in-group, and we tend to believe them and give them a lot more credibility, unearned credibility, only because of their group association. Now you add to that the media environment in which things are happening so fast, and a lot of times you don't have time to evaluate all the information coming at you. So you have a tendency to just take, if somebody's in your group, you tend to believe it and take it because you don't have time to dig through it all and think it all through. So that us versus them mentality and that trust and that believability becomes even more important.
Jeremy.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you. Jeremy.
Thanks. I want to go back to your original question, Rich, and build on something that Rhett said. I spent 30 years as an educator on both the elementary level and the college level, the university level. And what I've found, starting in the elementary level, is the manipulation of curriculum. And we even do that on the college level. And so I think there's a definite dumbing down of people. And when I say dumbing down, I don't say that to be rude. I mean more that people don't critically think. We don't prepare them in elementary through high school to learn how to actually read and critically analyze information. And once they get to college, they have no clue. And I say this from the perspective of having watched curriculum change, go from being teacher-based, teacher promoted, to being government promoted, politically promoted curriculum. And so when we have a society that doesn't critically think or critically analyze information, I think it's really easy to get people to follow whatever they're told. I think a lot of people follow Trump or whatever leader, but it's also based on the fact that they don't know how to critically analyze the information that is available to them. I even go all the way back to what happened in Nazi Germany. This was the most advanced nation on the planet. and yet people followed blindly because they were in such a bad strait economically that they just wanted to have something to follow to get out of it. So I think we've made it really easy in this country for people to follow blindly because we've literally removed the critical thinking skills necessary in the education system. That's my opinion, but it's also based on my experience of having taught for 30 years and watched curriculum literally change. The best example I can give is just 4 years ago, I would give a student a paper, for instance, on tobacco. You know, tell me the positives, the negatives, defend a position. And what I would get is students coming to me at the college level saying, oh, I found this wonderful research. It came from Harvard University. And then I would look at the research with them, and I would point out, and who underwrote this research? Oh, it's a guy named R.J. Reynolds. And you're looking at them going, a guy named R.J. Reynolds is not a guy, it's a tobacco company. And therefore, is there not, and as Rhett said, that word bias? Isn't there an innate bias in what that person is reading and that information? And if they don't know how to differentiate that, oh, this is biased from the get-go, then they just follow along blindly like, oh, this is okay. So I tend to believe that a lot of people follow Trump or whoever because they don't have the critical thinking skills necessary. And remember, I think critical thinking skills don't just come from education, they also come from life experience. I mean, it has to be tempered with a lot of things.
Well, thank you, Jeremy. Yeah, Tricia, go ahead.
Sudi had her hand up actually first, Rich, if you want to grab her. She had her
Who?
Is it Sudi?
Correct.
Sudi. Okay, so Sudi.
And then
okay,
Tricia.
Go
and
ahead,
then Tricia's
Sudi. Tricia, we'll get next to you. Okay, Sudi,
Sure.
Go ahead.
Hi. Well, some of the stuff I wanted to say was already mentioned, but as an immigrant who has lived here for 37 years, and I lived in Michigan and I lived in California half and half, I can see the great difference on how people are perceived and how they, the attitude towards the immigrants. You would think that California being more progressive, that they would be more open to immigrants. That's not true. You know, Michigan has a huge number of Middle Eastern people there, and the Jews and the Blacks and the Muslims have, managed to live among each other far better than I see various different, segments of the global community living here in California. It's very segmented. That's what it is in California. But, the political correctness, the part that Bill Maher is always questioning, I believe it really pushed a lot of people to go in hiding and find those people who were just like them and thought like them, or even were worse than them in their, very pigeonhole view of things. And, they were breeding among each other. So underground, I feel like, a group of people became far more rogue. And, Trump came and purposely ignited that fire of, xenophobia, racism, sexism, all of that. And, of course, some of the Obama era's economic decisions were not well, received by a lot of the factory people, or even people who were in, banking and other industries that they did a lot of outsourcing to other countries. It just became, as was mentioned before, the us against them, but the them was always the immigrants. Them was the Black, the brown community. And so we are here at this divide right now, and it has become, for somebody like me who went through the revolution in Iran, I saw religious bigotry, I've seen prosecutions, I've seen executions, Trump era is extremely painful for me to endure, because what I saw in Iran is happening in the United States. And there's no ifs and buts about it. The fascism is here and it's near. And, you know, this is not about being a Republican. I can't even imagine people who believe in Bible can, you know, be okay with someone like Trump. And so that itself reminds me again, because, you know, I lived also many years in Germany, you know, of the stories I heard from the Germans, because I did ask them, the elders, why would you stay quiet? You know, or like, why did your family stay quiet? And so I see that complicity right now in the United States, and it's very scary. And it's very unfortunate, you know, when I see abductions in unnamed cars with people who don't write, you know, they don't tell you why they're capturing you, they don't read your rights, and they just abduct you right in the middle of the streets of New York. This is not supposed to happen in the United States. I don't give a damn like what people believe in or they feel like they have been questions. Of course, if you know, if you're racist, you're sexist, or you're xenophobic and you're talking nonsense, you have to be called out on it. And if they get, you know, if they're conservative and they get offended by that, so be it. You know, when are we gonna grow? I mean, this country, as far as, you know, like I've said, I lived most of my life in the United States, but in comparison to Europe and, you know, other places, this country is so backward. It has so much room to grow. And, you know, it's a laughingstock of many other countries. So, you know, as Democrats, as progressives, as people of faith, whatever, you know, we find ourselves, we have to call out, we have to reach out, and we have to, you know, open up people's horizons, because the way it's going, and, you know, God forbid if Trump was to re-elected, I don't know what's going to come from this country.
Thank you, Suda. Trisha, did you want to say something? You're muted right now. There you go.
Thank you. Okay, so I've been taking a class on populism, and I find that the idea about populism answers a lot of my questions and issues that we're addressing here. That for Americans, the system is no longer meeting their needs. Like in the past, you know, before Nixon and all this political distrust, the system met their needs in that most of society felt the future generations are going to be more successful than them. The media was somewhat controlled. So you had a limited resource of information. You didn't have these extremists on the same footing via social media as the mainstream media. So you're getting a lot of extremist ideas as well that people don't necessarily differentiate, that's been, you know, had any filters applied to it. So you have a community that's feels like the system has let them down. So that makes us vulnerable to someone coming along, demigods coming along and saying, I represent the true people. I can fix your problems, which is what Trump did, which is what far left people do as well. Anybody coming along, no matter how ridiculous, promising to truly represent the people, to truly address their problems, our society is vulnerable to now. And no matter how self-serving or evil that person may be, you know, we see it with Trump. And I'm from the far left. And so I feel like I've really learned the lessons of the far left as far as how they utilize the same kind of strategies. Just as Trump does, the far left demonizes the other. They say they're the true speaker of the people, and anybody contradicting them is against the people. You try to control the media, and you see that with cancel culture. And of course, Trump wants to monopolize the media. He would like to do so legally. So you have the same kind of things happening on the left and the right. And I think to a great degree, it's because Americans are very disaffected and don't feel like our democratic system works for them. And I think it's also the social media, the availability of media, and people don't distinguish between, you know, mainstream thought and radical thought. It all seems the same on the internet. So you don't have that filtering. And the other thing is the global economy has left very many people disaffected. And I think another issue addressed in populism is there's mass immigration. And I'm not against immigration. I'm not especially against legitimate refugees, but it does have, when it's really unfettered, like it has been, like in Europe, you see it a lot, it disrupts the social structure to a certain degree. Immigrants can be difficult to absorb into the society, not only because it puts stress on the system as far as economics, but it also threatens people, how they feel in their social hierarchy, in the society's hierarchy. So it's threatening to people in that way. So, so those are the things that I think have affected it.
Thank you. Thank you, Tricia. So because of some of the things that are so bizarre that they have no real legitimate basis for believing, I sort of feel that they're being manipulated, but they're responsible for their own behaviors and their own attitudes. So, but they're willfully deceived, that they allow themselves to be deceived for their own, for a variety of reasons, their own personal reasons, but also, and if you guys, and if that's the case, if they're willfully deceived, as much as they are deceived to believe things that are patently false, absolutely no basis for having those beliefs, you can't inject bleach or chlorine into your veins to get rid of COVID, you need to wear a mask, that they have allowed themselves to deceive for their own purposes. Like sort of Adam and Eve, they allow themselves to be deceived in anticipation of their own personal gain. Now, if they can be deceived, how about us? Are we being manipulated too? I write down here, we cannot trust our news sources completely and cannot truly know the motives of our leaders. Who are they really behind the scenes? Who are our leaders behind the scenes when nobody's looking? What is the agenda? The organization looks different depending on where. I got this from, I forget his name, but it looks different from where you are in the organization. So if you're on the bottom, it looks a lot different than if you're at the top or if you're in the middle. So what is the agenda? Is it the agenda they say, or is it the agenda that of the higher levels? That is it what the stated agenda and the actual objectives of our leaders may be two different things. So if we can't believe Fox News and we can't trust them, can we really trust Democracy Now! And MSNBC and CNN and all those other left of center or far left news sources that we rely on? And it seems to me that we have a liberal Democratic leaning news networks, far right and Republican controlled networks, and third party or communist or foreign influence programming. And what this means is that we can trust our news sources a little more than we can trust politicians, spies, and traitors. So what do you guys think of that? Go ahead, Phil. Not hearing you, Phil.
Try it again.
Okay.
There you go.
I'll stick with this microphone.
That's okay.
Wow. This is concerning because the problem is largely on the right. And when you look at it that way, it's a symptom of worry that people in the center and then the left think they are start to believe more and more that they can't trust things. And that makes the problem worse, because when you have people who don't trust, can't trust anybody left or right kind of a thing, you end up with people who don't vote. And we saw some of that. And I know people like this, that exacerbates the problem. There's quite a bit of evidence from studies on authoritarianism and xenophobia, where it is a core group on the right that follows a lot of this stuff. There's a book a few years back called "What's the Matter with Kansas" that focused on this, and it talked about how people voted against their own self-interest, basically. And that's a problem. You know, people are there's the, like I say, there's the core people who believe in the conspiracy theories and such who will follow pretty much anything. Those are the right-wing authoritarian followers, as designated by Robert Altemeyer's studies. And then you kind of have a fairly large. I've got to look up studies after this because I need to know what the numbers are. I know there's a lot of people that voted for Trump because of abortion issues, because of the conservative issues, that are quite well aware of his nastiness, and obviously his virtue behavior is probably the worst they've ever seen. So it is, you know, so I want to say it's 20% that pretty much believe him on everything, another 20% or so that voted him in because he will do the things that they want, particularly to protect religion and put in conservative judges and allow the anti-abortion laws and Roe v. Wade to get overturned. Those are big numbers. And that gets you pretty close to 50% when you put all that together. So don't lose faith in the left, if you will, media. You know, something like MSNBC is obviously what I call advocacy journalism. There is advocacy journalism, which is sort of pushing aside, and then there is propaganda journalism. It is a false equivalence to put MSNBC up against Fox News. Completely different. I mean, the scale is just so completely different.
Thank you, Phil. Rhett, you had something to add?
Yeah, I was going to say, you know, thanks, Phil, and thanks to everybody for sharing. And definitely continue with the chat, everybody, just as a logistics thing. But if you, the chat is kind of, you know, pretty active right now. So if you did want to make a comment from there, you might want to do the raise hand or the digital raise hand because we may miss them. Lisa and I have been responding to a few of them, and some of you guys are chatting back and forth, which is great. But if you do want to voice one of those questions or comments, we may miss those from the chat. So definitely kind of chime in. But no, I was going to just say, as a critical thinker and as a skeptic in general, I'm very critical of politicians in general. And, you know, I take the media for what it's worth. I mean, sometimes, I mean, most of the news is just general information, right? It's like, okay, well, there's a police chase or there's a this or that. I mean, those things are pretty well trustworthy. I mean, it really, and then if you see a news article on multiple stations that all say the same thing and you're hearing the same thing from Twitter feeds, I mean, you kind of get that collective, you know, consolidation that, you know, hey, this is probably a true event. I mean, we may not know the whys and the hows behind everything, but you start to learn to trust that. So I've always been skeptical of politicians, and that's years of, you know, hearing campaign promises and then, like, you know, how many of those were actually fulfilled. Now, oftentimes that's because, you know, the House and the Senate might be in opposition with each other. Somebody's trying to, you know, do some good, but they're, you know, being held back by, you know, one of the other parties. So that's always a possibility. But sometimes the politicians just get, you know, lazy as well. So that's a good point, Phil, though, about, you know, not being too skeptical and critical and thinking that everything is corrupt. But I like your point, Rich. I know you're, you know, big into the propaganda stuff about, you know, being critical even of your own side, right? I mean, like I said, I love to go to groups like this, and I loved it when the you know, when the Republicans joined my group for the 4-part on politics. I really enjoyed learning you know, their views, and when Ron was talking about they felt like some of their issues have been ignored, it was fun to hear what were some of their main issues and why they voted for Trump. So that was very informative.
Lisa.
Oh, I was just going to underscore Phil's point that there's a big difference between propaganda and advocacy, because I think that gets overlooked. The main right-wing media sources right now have effectively become propaganda machines. It's not particularly their nighttime programming. It's really amazing. The disconnect from reality and just the propaganda is significant. Additionally, the fact that when you look at the rhetoric they're using, it's particularly divisive, it's reckless, and it's frankly dangerous based on, I think it was what Sudi was talking about too. That's how we get there. It's these narratives and acceptance of narratives that other people are your enemy, other people are the threat, other people are the reason for your problems. And so there's a continuum. It's not black and white, to Phil's point. It's on a scale. And so to try to put them all into one bucket can really be actually serving the purpose of propagandists, because it makes them seem like the rest, and the rest are not nearly as bad. They're not doing what the propagandists are doing.
Thank you, Lisa. So my view is so we're still going to need, no matter what news source we're getting it from, we're still going to need to decipher facts from commentary, which is opinion. We need to recognize each show's biases, and all of these shows have biases. And we need to be wary of manipulative propaganda. And I think with propaganda, it depends on how you define it. If all advertising in every form of persuasive media is defined as propaganda, meaning propaganda is neither good nor bad, or it's good or bad depending upon the intention of the propagandist, then it wouldn't really be a difference between propaganda and advocacy, because they sort of fit in the same category. But if you want to say there's a lesser part of that, I think one of the problems with that, I think, is that we miss a lot of propaganda. In other words, if we look at the right-wing propaganda only, we're going to miss foreign propaganda. We're going to miss third-party propaganda. We're going to miss propaganda from other sources, I guess. But we're going to some hidden or black propaganda that's being disseminated to us. So I think we're not getting the full picture. And I think even if it's just advocacy, right? We got to recognize that they are directing us, everything, they're directing us towards a certain point of view. So even in advocacy, they're doing that. So we need to be aware of that. And sometimes we might get directed to the wrong point of view. Go ahead, Lisa.
Okay, I didn't mean to cut you. I also, though, there is a difference. And that's that, to your point, I don't want to imply that only right-wing media is propaganda, number one. So there's other things that could fall into the propaganda bucket. The other thing is that even MSNBC will admit they lean left. They don't say, we're going to, like all the jargon that Fox News uses to say, we're not afraid to tell you the truth. We're going to, I had like a video I was putting together of all the stuff they use to say, I'm not afraid to tell you the truth. We're not the destroy Trump media. It's all of this stuff implying that they are not propaganda. That's also a difference. I think that might even be a split where you could start to split it out and separate it a little bit. Somebody says, hey, you know what? We're kind of the news for the left. Okay. But Fox is kind of the news for the right, but they act like they are not. And that's a little different. And I'm talking, the more extreme stuff at night is what I'm talking about, because Fox during the day, I haven't watched it more recently, but it seems a little more balanced. It doesn't seem quite as bad. But the nighttime stuff kind of gets unhinged. One thing that I found too, when you want to detect bias and what's going on, and it's hard to do now though, because people are not even doing anything fact-based. But what I used to do is take the subject matter, like take different arguments from different sources. So you have one thing, like say Kaepernick, and you go, okay, he kneeled. And then you listen to the arguments on both sides and you compare and you look at what they're prioritizing, what facts they're missing, and how they're lining up their argument. And what things are they conveniently walking around? And sometimes that's pretty revealing, and you can figure out what the bias is and what's going on, and you can get to more some semblance of the truth, because some narratives will walk around the most important fact, but just give you an explanation to deflect. For example, the Russian thing with Trump. If you listen to Hannity and those guys, they always talk about the investigation. They won't talk about the fact that he lied about all of his Russian contacts. They won't talk about anything else. It's always the investigation. And so your argument starts out with them not even talking about anything he did, always the investigation to deflect from everything else. Now the right wing or the left doesn't talk about any issues with the investigation. They focus on his behavior. But but their approaches tell you something, and then you have to decide which is more important, or are they both important to understand?
Very good.
Point. We have a couple of hands up there, Rich. If you want to grab
You
those,
do?
Andy,
Oh,
Andy, and then Andreas.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Andy.
Yeah, I'm going to say something controversial. I agree with everyone. I don't know if I'm allowed to do that, but allow me to. No, I mean, you know, we're so entrenched in our tribalism, and you know, people earlier were talking about like two-party system versus like in like Europe, or where they have like more of a parliamentary system or something, where like third parties actually have disproportionate influence and they could be kingmakers, versus here where we have two. If you take a look at some of the coalitions, like on the left and right, or I guess Republicans and Democrats in the United States, you know, it's just, there's some very interesting mixes. I think somebody mentioned, well, you know, we were talking about how, you know, Muslim Americans were like being treated, you know, especially now post 9/11. But before 9/11, they were in like Michigan, like being petitioned by like the Republican Party as being seen as like conservative family voters. And it's just crazy to see how, you know, history can change things so radically. And yeah, I mean, it's just like, but what I like is, you know, this is the rise of technology. This is nonpartisan, you know, forums like this, where people from the left, from the right, people who are undecided, which is a huge block, you know, the biggest voting block in the United States is not Republican or Democrat, it's independents. And a lot of these people are not heavily entrenched, and they're listening to all this media. And that's why I think, you know, everyone here, I don't think most people here are saying like the media is like super perfect or whatever. You know, every system can be improved. And the reason we're upset is because everyone in the middle who, you know, has the right to make a decision, they're getting kind of overwhelmed by the extremists who are dominating the conversation. Because like in any regular social setting, the people who get heard the first are the loudest, rather than, you know, what everybody says. And then I think these forums where we all say our opinions, say our perspectives, and like give that disclaimer, you know, that's actually really important. And that's why I agree with everyone, because you all, you know, from your perspective, everybody's right. And that's why we all hate politics, because politics is like talking to people who disagree with you, and that's always fun. Right,
well, we love you, Andy. We love
Thanks.
you, especially when you agree with all of us. All right, Andres.
Maybe I'm a politician.
Hi, everyone. Oh, Rich, do you mind, or was someone else going to go?
Oh, I didn't know if
Andre was going to go, and then
then her next.
Oh, Phil?
And then we'll get you next. So, Andres,
yes,
can we hear you?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I apologize for being late, and if anything I say is redundant to what you've already said, I apologize. But you know, when Trump was becoming a serious candidate, I decided I wanted to read Hannah Arendt's Rise of Totalitarianism, and as I was reading it, I mean, I was getting chills because there's so many parallels, you know, and one of them is the way that the, you know, fascists and brown shirts and, you know, it really gained prominence, gained this adherence, is by discrediting the social institutions. You know, and be it the media, the elected government, and we're seeing that now. You know, be it the post office, you know, discrediting the post office, discrediting mail, you know, voting and so forth. The media, of course. You know, that's the purpose of propaganda, is to muddle your thinking so much that you don't know what to think, and then then they dangle this nice little feel-good, simple solution in front of you. That's right out of the fascist playbook. So, I don't know if you discussed that.
Thank you, Andreas. Sumita?
Oh, I have a point about language, and I've met with Rich and Ellie and everyone, but I am not shy in terms of, I do not use the language of Republican. These are Nazis. This is definitely not acceptable to kidnap children. It is not acceptable to put 70,000 children in a camp and argue that they don't need soap, that they don't need, I mean, listening to the immigration attorneys in 2018, listening to what they were doing with these children is sick. It is sick. We do not stand in this country for human rights violations. And to pretend that this is in any way acceptable, or that my friends or anyone else can go on Fox News and people, every single one of you, if you have people in your family, or you have people, and I know family is hard to change, friends that you hang out with that then go watch Fox News, you are telling me as a woman of color that it is okay for Tucker Carlson to go on Fox News and say, yep, immigrants make this country dirty, and use the same language as Nazi Germany. You're saying that religious discrimination against Muslims is okay in a free society. You are saying it's okay that our government kidnaps people in vans. And for every single person, I am sorry, but we should all be ashamed of ourselves that we have let this go to this point where there are 150,000 people in this country that are in a coffin. There's 150 Kurds that fought with us who are now slaughtered. There's 8 people in the Ukraine who were waiting for our aid and who were killed by Russians, waiting for our aid. United States that was supposed to help them against Russia. 70,000 kids in a concentration camp. 6 children that were killed at the border. 150 or so that have been killed in hate crimes from Islamophobia, in Christchurch, in synagogues that were people that were shot. Coming to this country for freedom against religion, and then people making it sound like it's acceptable to be a Republican. It's not Republican. This is fascism, and this is Nazi, and there have been many people who've died in the past 4 years. So everyone, I think, needs to start off with that in terms of this is not acceptable, not in my country. I won't allow human rights violations. And every single person that said they were a Trump supporter, when he did that Muslim ban, I don't care what the Supreme Court said. I don't care. I know what religious discrimination is, and I don't care how long someone's been my friend. When they heard those concentration camps and they said, I like Trump, they were gone. And my mother, my grandmother was kicked out pregnant in France, in Nazi Germany, in France by the Germans when Germany invaded. And every single person in this country should be ashamed of how many people have died. Those people in El Paso from his hate speech, those people in Dayton, Ohio, these people in Gilroy, and he went to those hospitals and gave a thumbs up sign that those people, brown people, were dead. And people normalize that. And every single person should be ashamed that we have let this country fall in such a horrific manner, because this country was important to not only, it was the world's democracy. So this is not Republican. This is fascism. And I, for one, I'm going to fight with everything I have, because this is sickening. And these are not Republicans. These are American Nazis. And to be excited by the cruelty by the suffering that they have caused by these children who've been raped in those concentration camps, molested. It is vile and inexcusable. So if Donald Trump wants to change the language for these innocent, poor children seeking humanity and seeking empathy from our country, if he wants to call them migrants instead of asylum seekers who may have committed a misdemeanor, we should not shy away from calling them exactly who they are, Nazis. And it doesn't matter if you've been friends with people for 15 years, 20 years, 25 years. Anyone who stands for this human rights violations is a Nazi.
Thank you, Sumita. Yeah, that's a lot of craziness. It's crazy. Nobody believes that not being a Nazi or being a white supremacist is a moral thing to do, a right thing to do, a good thing to do. I cannot believe that anybody truly, truly in their heart believes that, and yet they do it. Ellie, you wanted to say something, and then I'll come back to you, Rhett. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll try to make it short. I mean, there are a lot of psychosocial dynamics, if you will, as to how certain things get mythologized. But I wonder if there's a biochemical predilection or something in the biochemistry of the brains that allows one person to enter, to occasion that state of suspension of disbelief, so as to be susceptible to propaganda. And there may be a biochemical thing here as to the adhesion, factor. We all know, certain people are susceptible. They may be fearful, emotional, on the tail end of what Lisa was saying. But what is it about myself versus maybe a total right-winger that makes him more susceptible to dogma versus me, and I may be equally as frightful of thing. And there may be a biochemical element to this.
Phil, do you want to comment on that? I know you have some expertise in this area. Before I had something else to comment about, so maybe you should chime in first.
Yeah, just briefly, there are, you call it biochemical or neurological. Basically, there are. I categorize it as personality traits, and this is something I'm researching and working out for my book. But I just posted a couple things on the chat in terms of the research on authoritarianism. So take a look at those. That'll give you pretty much the answers you're looking for. Yeah, there are people that are more susceptible to following and believing. Just to throw another quick point out that I learned more recently, in terms of more on the left or more on the right, the people on the right are more easily triggered by the fear-based things. People on the left can trigger to that same level, but they have a baseline where they are generally not. And we saw this happening after 9/11, right? Before 9/11, you had people like Glenn Beck that were the traditional fear-based, whatever. I'm sorry, I'm not verbalizing well. And then after 9/11, everybody was on the boat. So the research shows that the people on the left, they can trigger up to being getting behind an authoritarian leader under those kinds of circumstances. That's why those types of leaders try to create those circumstances. We've seen Putin do this, and now we're seeing Trump try to do it. But when the problem is passed, then they go back to baseline, and then the worst offenders, the authoritarian followers on the right, they kind of stay at that level. But check out the references I just put up. The answers are from current sciences, at least up to 2005, are in there.
Awesome. Rhett, go ahead.
Cool, thanks, Phil. I figured you would have a better answer, so thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I just wanted to thank Sumita. Is she still on? I just admire. There. Oh yeah, she's there. Thank you so much for sharing that and your passion. And that's a good distinction. I mean, we try to start using the language. We want to start maybe gearing away from using this divisive language, Democrats versus Republicans. And Lisa commented on this too. And that's a good point that you made, that this is not, I mean, you said it really strong, but it's a good point to make too, just about all Republicans don't fall into this camp. I know, I mean, obviously there's the Lincoln Project. There's a lot of other Republican groups that are against Trump. When we were still doing live meetings, we had an individual that was really outspoken and passionate about these topics. And he was a Republican, but he was so against Trump. He was like, this is not my Republican Party. This is a completely different party. And he's, and I agree, he's doing some crazy things. And I can't believe that people are overlooking some of the atrocities that you mentioned. And it just seems to just be like, oh, well, it is surprising to me that that's happening. So I really appreciate everything you said.
And I'm sorry to interrupt. Thank you, Red. For me, it's very sad in terms of the maturity level, or in terms of the non-confrontation, or the unwillingness to stand up for what is ultimately right, and the lack of conviction. It's very difficult, because so many people are looking at this country as a world leader, as the people who stand up for the values of our nation. And we're just like, whatever, it's okay. Yeah. People can, that's okay. It's like, it's painful.
And
Tricia, go ahead.
I was going to say, one more thing I wanted to say was, one of my goals for this meetup is to try to bridge the gap. And, I've been on the Christian, I used to be a Christian, and now I'm an agnostic humanist. So I've been on that fence, and I've been more conservative, and now I've swung more progressive. So I feel like I have at least some knowledge in a couple of these different areas, probably more so with religion and non-religion. And I try to bridge the gap between these, breaking those stereotypes and whatnot. But anyway, my point is so on Twitter, for example, I reached out to some Republicans, or current Republicans, under Trump supporters, maybe is a better way to say it, to try to bridge that gap. And I said, hey, they were clearly saying some offensive things. And I said, hey, let's try to work together for a solution. So I kind of put a small step in the direction of saying, hey, is there some way that we can work together? Let's look at individual issues and come together and work towards a solution. And all I got back was just, boom, oh, here's what you mean by working together. And they showed some meme about, something that the Dems did against the Republicans. I'm like, dude, I'm not talking about what's happened in the past. I'm talking about, let's move forward from here. Let's have healthy dialogue, and let's kind of move beyond some of the division and try to work together. I was making a step in that direction, and I just got slapped in the face, shot down immediately. Nobody even took my proposal seriously. So that was disheartening, but it's not. I'm not going to stop trying. Lisa, go ahead.
No, Tricia.
Oh, Tricia. Sorry, Tricia.
Tricia's been waiting.
Yeah. Sorry.
To respond to you, Red, actually, I just found a group, and I put it in the chat, Red, there, called Braver Angels, and they did that specifically. They and I like their tact. I mean, I come from a background where I want to be advocate, an activist, and take positions and strongly held positions. But the reality is, most people are not bad or evil, even if we disagree with their politics. And they're mostly motivated by trying to make improvements to the society. Even far right people, which probably most of us don't identify with, but even they predominantly want to make America a better place. They believe the way to get there is very different from the left. So this group, Greater Angels, or Braver Angels, whatever, tries to bridge that gap and empower individuals with tools so they can talk to their neighbors, talk to their community members who they don't disagree with, but and to help understand better. And I think that's a helpful thing these days with so much polarization going on. I really try not to demonize the other, which I think is very, very common in politics these days. It's to, obviously Trump does it and calling names. The left does it with calling everybody Nazis. And you don't reach people by telling them they're bad. You can't say you're an asshole, and try to convince that person to change their mind about something. So I wanted to make that point, and there was one more thing, and I think I've forgotten this. So I'll I'll let it go for now.
Thank you, Tricia. You know, there's a website out there I just recently found. It's somebody's mega hat, and it says, Rich Procida is an asshole. So Google it, or don't Google it, because I don't want him to get hits. But go ahead, Lisa.
No, the only thing I was going to say is going back to that us versus them, good versus evil thing. There is on the left, there is so following the trajectory of this over time, the right has demonized the left for a long time, going back to Obama's years. I mean, and evil and all of that rhetoric, that goes back a long ways. The left, I'm an independent. The left has been, to me, painfully stupid and oblivious to what was going on the right. And they still thought that they could work together with people who consider them evil. And that's part of an issue, because what I do is I'm not going to say like all of the right. To your point, it differs. Not everybody's the same. So I'll test and see how much people are following the group think. If they come back with a meme, that's all they've got, or a personal insult, I know it's not going very far. But if they can engage, then we talk, and that's fantastic. But this right-left thing, and again, it's kind of, to me, the left is getting there, but to me there's a false equivalence, because so much of what the right is rooted in is this us versus them, good versus evil thing. And that's part of their base. The left is just starting to wake up, and for reasons I don't know, how stupid can you be? Again, I'm an independent. They're just waking up to the fact that the right hates them. And it's stunning to me that it's taken this long. And so now there's rhetoric that's going back that way, but it's frankly been kind of a long time coming. And frankly, that level of obliviousness has perpetuated the problem and allowed it to grow this bad and this long. That's just my opinion, because again, I've been watching this for years, unfolding, and it's kind of stunning to me. So that's all I wanted to say. But again, it's not everybody on the right and everybody on the left. I'm using generalizations, but it's the right core is embedded with this kind of thinking. And now there's an evolution of people on the left who are starting to react to it and also grow.
So, okay. So I came up with this idea in the article that we have structures of our organizations are pyramid shaped, with the one leader at the top and the minions far below. And, you know, we claim to value democracy, yet so this pyramid structure is kind of a haven for sociopaths and narcissists who really pursue their own interest, not the interest of the group. So just as we've moved away from institutional religion, we might need to move away from institutional politics. I mean, we still have those organizations there, but we don't look at them as places for people of like mind, but more as tools to be used to achieve certain ends. And it's not just, you know, government organizations or corporations, but all of our institutions tend to be structured in this same way. So is there any way to make our institutions more democratic, especially our political institutions? Because one of the things we're going to end up talking about is groupthink, where people don't want to say something that is going to cause conflict. But you absolutely have to. And that's why it's so important to have groups like this, where we can actually have conversations where we're disagreeing with one another and being critical of one another's ideas, so that we can then allow for more diversity in leadership. In other words, the leadership doesn't come, when we do that, it weakens the leader. And So does anybody want to talk about that? Anybody have ideas on that part? How we can, go ahead, Ellie.
Just to the degree I've been having like a little side conversation is that, you know, groups, one axis among others, or one concomitant of groupthink is orthodoxy. And orthodoxy by its very nature is alienating of its individual conscript. So we're gonna have people that we don't disagree with. We're gonna have people that just, you know, throw memes out there. We're gonna have people that are not articulate polemicists. We have people that feel differently about the borders and so forth and so on. But but ultimately, if we don't get together with those that we're different with and get on the street en masse, we can't show the outrage that Sumita was talking about. We can talk about all of this ad nauseum, right? And we can point out to the differences and the critical thinking and all of that. But I say we should get out there en masse and protest, because what's happening is disgusting, and we need to show that to the world, to ourselves, and to our leaders. And not let our differences stop us from being mobilized, because a diffuse power base is not good at all.
Okay, thank you, Ellie. Ron? Go ahead and unmute yourself there.
I'm sorry, man. I completely lost track of where I was going with that. I got distracted by kids. Just go on. It'll come back to me.
Well, go ahead, Brett.
Okay, yeah. Ron, think of your question. I would love to hear what you have to say. But similar to what you said, Rich, I like this, you know, this pyramid scheme that you're building, but keep in mind that, and that pyramid scheme is not just, you know, Democrat or Republican, it's both, right? But think of it in a slightly different way. I've been, you know, I go to a lot of different, not really think tanks, but they kind of are. I mean, I've been to a variety of different groups of people really critically thinking about a lot of these topics. And if you look at a chart of who's held office over the years, I mean, it does seem to bounce, you know, back and forth quite a bit. You know, you'll have a run of a couple Democrats, and then you know, Republican, and it flips back and forth fairly evenly. But think about who wins every time when that happens. Talking about a pyramid scheme, we've got the 1% and the 1% of the 1%. I'm talking about financially wealthy people who don't really care who's in office. You know, they've got their hands in so many different funds and stocks and whatever, you know, financial institutions that they're involved with, that they, you know, if a Republican, you know, takes office or a Democrat takes office, they can just shuffle a little stuff here, shuffle a little stuff there. Maybe they might have to adjust stuff, but they're still going to make out. And so we really also need to look at, you know, the financial aspect of this, and the disproportionate, you know, income inequality. And that's, you know, obviously a major problem that we need to consider. And some people are even saying that that pyramid scheme of the rich people wanting to keep this division between Republicans and Democrats as a distraction, because they're up there saying, hey, I don't care who wins, I'm going to stay rich, I'm going to be rich, I'm going to stay rich, and they can continue to maintain power that way. So just something to consider, and we need to think about that as well.
Thank you, Rhett. And Ron, did you remember?
You know, it bounced off of, and I've sorry, I've had to be in and out of the conversation. You saw my kids earlier. I'm just kind of trying to respond, Lisa, to something you said. I don't know the context of it. You had mentioned that the right hates the left, and you're probably right in, like, there are some really hateful people out on the right. Now I'm right of center. I don't know how far. I'll say I'm moderate right. I think that's where I came on my last Pew Research survey or something like that. I'm trying desperately to talk to people on my side of the aisle and try to get at what they're thinking, and trying to get at, because I know people, I have family members who are on the right and the left side of the aisle. Now, I hear terms like, you know, homophobe and Islamophobe and thisophobe and thatophobe, and I'm going, I'm not fearful of people I disagree with. Now, maybe there are people on the right who are fearful, and I need to be able to go to talk to them, because they're not going to be able to talk to this group of people. They just don't. It's not in them to do that. They're scared of you guys, and maybe they are phobic. But I think we need to speak to the people, and maybe this is already addressed. I'm sorry if it was. Like I said, I've had to be a little in and out here. But we need to speak to people on our sides of the aisle and say, where are you getting this from? Because, you know, for me, I'm on the right side. I'm telling people that the majority of people out on the left are not bad people. Yes, there are some. There are some people out on the right who are bad. I don't, you know, when I say some, I don't mean, you know, 3 or 4. I mean a decent percentage. And I agree with those who say we need to get out in the streets and protest. We need to get out in the streets and start talking to each other and understand that you're not the enemy. And I don't know who the enemy is. That's my problem. And I don't know if there is one. I mean, you guys brought up us versus them. And yeah, I try to check myself when I hear the us versus them stuff. And I'm trying to reconcile that and get people who think us versus them to think a little more along the lines of, hey, let's talk to the them then. I think that's where we need to head with this stuff, and I don't know how to get there. So, Lisa, you can respond.
No, I think you made a very good point. And I think by pointing it out, this is being led, from what I'm seeing, this us versus them mentality is being led by the media. And it started with the George Bush thing to help get us into Iraq and gain support. And then they tried to hold the coalition together with using fear and terrorism and stuff like that. So this us versus them, now it's morphed because it's a very useful manipulative tool. And so that's part of it. And some people are following that. And that's the challenge. And like you said, I appreciate you saying you want to go out and talk to, you know, where did you get that? See, that's always interesting. Where did you get that? Where did you get that understanding? Because so much of it will come back to the media. It's not from experience, right? And, but they've really amped it up. I mean, you know, they've convinced, going back even 4 years ago, they were convincing people that they may have to take to the streets to fight for the safety for this country against these liberals. I mean, and I'm not talking about wackos. You know, I'm not talking about the guy who's sitting in his bedroom. You know, I'm talking about people who have a megaphone who are saying this. And what that does is it desensitizes even the people who don't believe it. It plants a seed and it desensitizes them to rhetoric, and it, you know, then you end up with kids in cages and you end up with a whole bunch of other stuff. So it's a dehumanization, and it's not everybody on the right. You know, the left has their issues too. It's not everybody on the right, but the media has become something that's very corrosive, particularly on the right, from just the narratives they're using. And I say that in the last 3 or 4 years. I don't mean that it was a problem before, but the last 3 or 4 years I think have been particularly bad. And if you watch any of that media now, it can be crazy. I mean, it's off the hook. To me, it seems that way. As far as the threat, the fear, they're coming after us. We've got to save our country. And they reference liberals as everybody. The left will focus on Trump, which is also tends to be a little different. The right is chastising the entire left, which is like half the country. And to me, there's a little bit of a difference there too. But to your point, we have to learn to talk to each other. We have to learn to speak up. But some people have been brainwashed, I'll say, on either side. But I don't want to do false equivalence when I say either side too, so that becomes a little uncomfortable. But that some people have been brainwashed. And you might be able to get to them, but I've done enough NLP and stuff like that too to know some people are just, I won't say it, but gone for right now.
What is NLP?
Neuro-Linguistic programming.
And what is that?
It's where you can make connections. It's neuro-linguistic programming, so it's connecting with the mind at a subconscious level. So basically, the brains have almost been rewired. So what the right does, which is, I wasn't going to get into this, but what the right does, which is really good, and they'll call it the left is triggered, but the right will anchor words with strong emotions and a lot of meaning. So if you mention Soros, for example, it means a ton on the right. To the left, unless you've been paying attention to the right, to the left, it doesn't mean much of, he doesn't mean that much of anything. Susan Rice is a great example. Susan Rice is a name that on the right, they've anchored a lot of emotions around. If you've listened to the media and stuff, and I could tell like how from my conservative friends splashing through media, they're very aware of Susan Wright and they don't like her. On the left, she's just Susan Wright. And some people may or may not recognize her name, but it's kind of whatever. But this connecting strong emotions and anchoring strong emotions around certain words is something that the right does extremely well. And they go back to those triggers when they want to kind of blow up people's thinking, because those strong emotions derail cognitive thought.
Jeremy.
Yeah, I wanted to touch back on something that Red had said, that it's more, in my opinion, economics, because you look at these past elections, even after the last 30, 40 years, and how, 8 years Democrat, 8-year Republican, the rich, the super wealthy, the 1% of the 1%, they want control. And I think they see everything as a puppet. And if you even look at the media is owned by big money. I mean, I'll go back several years. You look at what used to be NBC, MSNBC was owned by General Electric. And what did General Electric do? They built engines for fighter airplanes. This is definitely right-wing control over the media. And I read something just in yesterday's Times that is dealing with this new, this current piece of legislation regarding the HEROES Act and all this. And there's a piece in there that definitely ties into fascism, that folks want to, at the senatorial level, they want to basically pass this piece that allows them to keep employees from suing. Well, if you look deeper into it, and this was very well explained, this has actually been being put forward by the Cato Institute through ALEC, American Legislative Exchange Council, which is all the Koch brothers. And this push is basically to take away, what they want to do in this is literally erase rights that were gotten through the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, also other employment rights, and basically make it impossible for an employee to sue. They say it's about COVID-19, but it goes beyond that. And there is really this lack of empathy coming out of the Senate, which seems to be Republican, but I think it's like what Rhett was saying, it's money control, because ultimately they don't want you or I suing them, or you or I having the same education as them, because then we can compete on the same level as them. It equalizes the playing field. And I personally believe that this has been going on for decades, because they don't want us to have that control. And it's now rearing its ugly head in such a fascistic way that, to me, I put in the chat earlier that I think every single person should be terrified as to what they're seeing happening in Portland, happening at these detention centers. I mean, this is exactly what went on in Gestapo-occupied, Nazi Germany. And the only reason I can make that statement is because my parents grew up there and were in concentration camps. We know what fascism looks like, and we're seeing it in our own country, and people are acting passive and, just, oh, this is no big deal. This will pass. Well, that's what they thought in Germany, and guess what? It didn't pass in a positive way. So I can't get past why there are so many people right now who are so apathetic and passive to what's going on. even if it's just Portland, the fact is every one of us should be, you know, looking at this going, holy shit, in the United States of America, whoa, this shouldn't be happening. And you know, part of it is it's sociopathology. This person in charge and these people in this party and these super wealthy people are very fascistic because all they care about is getting more wealthy. And they're never going to do anything or allow anything to stop them. So, you know, I mean, even look at what's gone on in Portland. None of these people are in marked cars. They don't have any insignia. Are they even US troops? Or maybe they're part of Blackwater. Did anybody ever think that they're really just paid for mercenaries that have been sent into cities because they have no insignia? The United States Armed Forces, according to the Constitution, are supposed to defend an enemy from without. National Guard is not put out by the president. He's put out by the governors of the states. So who are these people and where the hell are they coming from? We need to critically think on a deeper level. What the hell is really going on here? I mean, that's why I put in the chat earlier, I think people should be terrified because this, you know, it started years ago. And when someone says to me, there are good people on both sides, we had the words come up by a few participants, the word evil. Well, I can honestly say when I look at someone who's a Nazi, that's evil. That is the embodiment of evil. There's no good person on each side.
Thank you, Jeremy. Andreas, did you want?
Okay, well, just, you know, what Jeremy's describing is new here, but of course it's not new elsewhere. And Uncle Sam has been, you know, responsible for quite a bit. You know, when I saw those vans, you know, I lived in Argentina when I was a kid, and, you know, and it reminded me of, you know, people getting rounded up and disappeared in Argentina and Chile in the 70s, you know. So Uncle Sam, you know, somebody said, you know, we were the main democracy. Well, you know, in some parts of the world, we're not seen as the beaming, you know, the beacon of freedom. But what I really want to talk about, you know, is, you know, if you want to talk to other people, get off of Facebook. I think that's, you know, I think Facebook and Twitter, I mean, their model is to get us, you know, as aggravated as possible, because because then we can't look away. You know, that's just psychology, and it's just about the buck. You know, eyeballs equals money, and the base emotions are what drives what gets, you know, gets people's attention. You know, high-minded, you know, idealism, you know, doesn't do the trick. You know, it's getting people to go. So you know, that's and I have to catch myself all the time with that stuff. You know, I just get into little you know, arguments over stupid stuff that I wouldn't, in ways that I would never behave. You know, person to person, you know, it's just like road rage versus bumping into somebody in the sidewalk. You lose the human connectivity. So, you know, I think you know, we talk about the media, but I think social media is a big part of the problem. So that's what I have to say. Thanks.
I find myself arguing with myself in the shower and other places over fictitious issues with fictitious people, having a fake argument. I don't know why I do that. But Rhett, when does this go till? How far? 8:30?
Probably 10:30, maybe. No, I'm just joking.
That's a long time.
I mean, people obviously are slowly dropping off, and we're pretty casual. So obviously, if you need to leave, feel free to do so. We might give it till 8:30. I mean, that would be maybe a good stopping point. Okay. I had a couple more comments since I've got the floor here.
Go ahead.
Obviously, the media is heavily driven by advertisements, right? So they tend to pick the extreme views, left or right, just whatever's going to get, you know, more publicity. More publicity means more hits, more advertisements. That's more money for them. But then social media can be the same way. Sometimes you might find a nice chat room that pretends to be, hey, let's dialogue about Democrats and Republicans, or you know, God versus no God. But sometimes those things can be distractions, and you know, obviously they are, but some of them, like certain YouTube channels, and maybe even Facebook, I'm not sure, but can be driven by ads as well and money. So the more hits that page gets, there's actually revenue. So they will stir up all kind of controversy, and then they know how to push the button. It's almost like a husband and wife who know each other so well that they know how to, say the right thing to get you angry. The left and the right, or these experts, sometimes know that too. And they say, hey, let's stir up some controversy about this. And we know that the left is going to get upset or the right is going to get upset. And they'll just throw these topics out there, and you just watch the chats fly, and that's all revenue for somebody. So you need to be careful, obviously for yourself, just because it's a waste of time, but you could actually be funding some cause that you have no idea what's behind it.
Go ahead, Ellie. We got about.
I'm gonna make it real quick. I agree both with Andreas and Red, and how about social media, corporate media, the roles has put things on a big decibel level as far as getting revenue, stuff like that. And I think I'm all for critical thinking engagement. At the same time, I just want to let people know that if we don't show our outrage or commensurate with that which our society is being besieged with, then we have no moral credentials to criticize the Nazis.
I wanted to, I don't know if this is something that's to close with, because we didn't really make it through the whole article here, which is okay. So, but it looks like that sometimes our leaders create conflict in order to keep us glued to either the screen or to our cause or to our ideology. And so this might be, and then we have what I've called progressive sacred cows. In other words, right now, for example, Medicare for all. You have to be, you cannot be a progressive unless you support Medicare for all. And right now, Progressive Democrats of America is trying to push that onto the platform. And part of that process becomes, you're not a real progressive unless you agree with us on this. There was another thing. Defund the police. Now, what is that? Is that a policy, or is that a 3-word phrase packed with emotion that is intended to draw a line, create a division? I mean, obviously you got a lot of help from Trump, but what were they doing, for example, when they came up with this slogan? And that's all it is, really, a slogan, And so sometimes even our own leaders are working to draw a line and put us on their side and the other people on the other side. And so I think we fall victim to that. We've got like 5 more minutes. Any closing comments?
That's a good point, Rich, and just similar to what others have said in the what I just mentioned about the distraction of social media. I mean, and Jeremy and I were on an event a week or so ago, and it was like just a real short. I think it was a real short video talking to some of the social media engineers, and they were actually designing things to actually promote us to want to look and click on our phone. They were actually. This is not just passively doing it. It was like built-in design. They, colors and where things are on the phone, and just, how often do you get phone anxiety? If you're away from your phone for X period of time, you get that anxious, like, did I miss something? Did I miss something? And they put out studies where people are just looking at their phone like X hundred number of times a day or something. It's just completely insane. So sometimes you just need to unplug. You need to say, hey, I'm working. And it's really annoying when people say things like, oh, I sent you a message like 2 seconds ago. Did you get it? Did you get it? Did you get it? It's like, well, dude, no, I didn't get it yet. I didn't look at my phone yet. So every once in a while, go take a jog, go take a bike ride, go somewhere and just unplug from your phone and just, chill out, not be so glued to it, and manage your time, obviously, with how much social interaction you have. Are you really doing any good arguing with that person that's completely opposite of you? Probably not. And like Lisa said, sometimes you can get a sense of, if they come back with a meme just in your face, clearly they don't want a dialogue. Trying to find those people who truly want to dialogue with you and kind of meet in the middle somewhere. Like Ron, it does a great job of that. So thank you, Ron. I know you're one of the good ones that are and open about wanting to dialogue. So that's a great thing. So yeah.
Lisa.
Just real quickly, I would also like to point out, when engaging in social media, first, I've learned a ton of off social media. I kind of feel badly. It wasn't my intent, but when it comes to like racism and stuff like that, having grown up where I did, and then interacting with a lot of people I knew during the Obama years, my understanding of racism is way better now. So you can learn a lot from it. I think the key thing is, though, is when I approach social media, I'm never trying to change anybody's mind. First of all, I don't even start out with that way. I'll just say what I think and why. And that's important because and it was a conscious decision I made, and it's very important because people get caught in their own circles. And don't be disrespectful, don't call people names, but hey, this is what I think and why. Because I saw firsthand with people I knew, if nobody responded like I disagree, the level of just viciousness almost, and the frequency would go up. And merely just like putting my foot in the door and saying, if I didn't have time to respond, I'd say, not everybody agrees. And it kind of just slowed them down on some level, a little bit. And here was the thing too. There's psychology experiments that show that when somebody's in a room full of people and you're asked, is the answer A, B, or C? And it's clearly C, but everybody else answers A, people will start thinking it's C. So it's a matter of it's not a matter of trying to change people's minds or force an opinion. I look at it as an attempt to understand from the people I can, but it's also just to be out there so that if somebody's looking around, because I really had a sense this was happening more several years ago, people were kind of looking around, not feeling comfortable with what was going on. But they're like, everybody else is saying the same thing. And so I would just go out and just say, here's what I think. And then they had somebody else out there who's saying something different finally for them. And sometimes it's just presenting another point of view that they might not have heard. And that's it. And for the people who can respond, I've learned a lot from them too. I look at it as difference of opinions. I look at it as triangulation. I have my point of view, which is one line. If I find somebody else with a different point of view coming at it a different way, they come at it another way. And where we intersect is probably a little closer to what's really going on. And look for those common areas. And the more different opinions I can get, the where they intersect is really where the value point is. But I would never go on social media expecting to change somebody's mind or anything like that. The person I'm speaking to or I'm writing to or I'm responding to, I'm not responding to them. I'm thinking of anybody else who might be watching because they're going to do whatever they're going to do. I don't really care. And I'm not really talking to them. It's just providing a different point of view to other people.
Yeah. You can't get a troll to agree with you.
Well, yeah. And it's not really, telling somebody they're wrong is not a good way to start either. I mean, that's pretty much a good way to cause defenses to come up, but saying, hey, this is kind of how I look at it.
Yeah.
That's a really good approach. I mean, that's what I usually say too. Like I said, I used to be a Christian. Now I'm an agnostic humanist, but I'm not looking to convert anybody religiously, politically, anything. And I just want to, get accurate information out there. So if somebody, says something completely wrong, like some of the examples Rich gave, just something blatantly, completely wrong, especially against my view. Like if a Christian says, all atheists this, or an atheist says all Christians that, and I know it's not true, I like to just, politely debunk that and then say, hey, think about this. But in terms of converting people, I don't care, what you believe. Let's just try to come together. We have to coexist. There's going to be differences forever. And I think you're less frustrated if you're out there trying to convert people. It's going to be so frustrating when it doesn't happen. You're trying to convince somebody of something. It just doesn't work that way. So it's 8:33, guys. I totally appreciate you guys joining us and sticking around. If there's any last comments from Lisa or Rich, and hopefully a few of us here can stick around just for a few extra minutes if you have any closing comments, but obviously feel free to chime out at any time, and definitely save the chat. Down in the chat box, the three little dots, do the save chat, and it'll show you what folder it saved it in. There's a bunch of great stuff there. People put out links. It might be on the left, might be on the right. So definitely critically think everything that you watch. And hopefully there's some good stuff out there. I definitely saw some good stuff pop by.
Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Rhett. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, everybody who participated. And those who are listened in, we appreciate that you've came and were a part of this. And just a short announcement, on Saturday at 11 a.m., I'm doing a webinar, and I posted it in the chat. And I don't know if did I mention this already? I don't think so. Progressive Democrats of America Chapter Organizing Committee for the East Los Angeles County area. So if you want to join us on that meetup, we're trying to start a PDA chapter in the East Los Angeles County area. And
Cool.
I put the link in the chat too. And
awesome.
I hope you guys enjoyed the discussion and had a good time. And all right, thank you very much. All right, that's pretty much it. I'll hang out if people have questions.
Yeah, I'll hang out
You're
for
welcome.
a while.
Thank you, Phil. Okay, so thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
So now we're.
Thanks.
I was thinking about maybe I'm going to write another article, so maybe we'll have another.
Cool.
After
cool.
I write another article.
Yeah, this worked out really good because I had a couple ideas on what topics to come up with next, and I was just on the verge of like, well, I could probably squeeze it out, but I didn't. I wanted to do it justice. And when you came along, and I was like, oh, that's perfect timing. It kind of saved me from, because I've got a couple presentations that I haven't quite finished. And obviously things are hot on the politics topic, so it would be kind of stupid not to ride that wave to some degree. Obviously, we've got Black Lives Matter, we've got the election coming up. Things will probably be more political in this group, moving forward until probably even post-election, because there's probably going to be some excitement post-election as well.
I think we're in for some pretty interesting times this fall.
Yeah, and hey, for those of you who do like to not like, it's kind of a bad word, but for those of you who do march and protest, that's awesome. Definitely, that's definitely needed at times, but definitely around the election, I would definitely caution you about that. I mean, I seriously think either way, there's going to be some mass riots. I mean, if Trump wins, there's going to be some crazy Trump supporters that are so happy that they might actually riot, but there's so many people against Trump that there's going to be riots on that end. And I think the worst is going to be if Trump loses, there's going to be some diehard Trump people out there just absolutely protesting, and they're probably going to, Trump has already positioned himself with an excuse on why he failed, basically saying that the mail-in ballots are going to be fraudulent, and if he loses, he's going to blame that, and a lot of his constituents are going to be like, yeah, let's go make a difference, and they're going to go out and not just protest, they're going to be rioting. So I would stay away from the protests during those times, just to protect yourself. I think it's going to really get crazy. So be careful.
I tell you what I see. I see him, what looks like daily shitstorms to take away attention from, bad economic news and so forth. But I see it really as laying like bricks on one on top of each other, starting with the post office, discredit the post office, and then discredit, mail voting. And quite honestly, I think this stuff you saw in Portland was a dress rehearsal.
Yep.
I think you're going to see that shit all over the place in blue states, when people, if he tries to steal the election and people come out in the streets, I think you're going to see, some pretty ugly stuff. I think, like I said, it's right out of the playbook that's described in Hannah Arendt's book, the rise of totalitarianism, or the roots of, I forget what the exact title of the book is, but he is an ignoramus, but it seems like he's done some studying, or at least his people have done some studying of tyrants past, because it's quite consistent.
Yeah,
Some of these.
Well, he has an advisor.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, he had a phone call with Putin a week ago. So I mean,
Putin is. I think Putin's in
it's
charge of it. So
that's the thing. He
very,
has really savvy. He has really savvy undergirding. And that's what we have to worry about. I mean, just because he's not an ideologue and he's a Philistine through and through, that doesn't mean that he's incapable of acting fascistically. And I totally agree with Andreas. It wasn't the Portland thing. It wasn't just theatrical. It wasn't just optics. It wasn't just political gesticulation. It was in fact dress rehearsal, and it was sending out a message as to what he's very capable. It was basically mobilizing his own personal army to do political currying or so. So, yes, to suppress dissent. I agree with you, Andreas.
I think he's that idea that he's going to have troops in the streets in democratic cities on election day. That's what I think he's setting up. That's part of that step plan. Go ahead, Lisa.
He set the precedent with that. He tested the reaction, and it was accepted by his base and other people. So that's really important because he's done it before now when it wasn't with the election. So it is a big deal. And it'll be interesting to see. There's been talk of his resignation, which I think is totally crazy. I don't think it will happen, but I do see one circumstance in which it could. And that is if the economy comes off the rails so badly that something has to be done, kind of like it did in 2008 with George Bush. And we can't wait till November or January because he will incompetently handle the economy. And even enough GOP and Democrats will come together to get him out of office beforehand, but it may take like an agreement where he's not criminally prosecuted and all of these other things that are bothering him, because he really has a lot to lose by leaving office. And that's really about, it's kind of out there, but I saw how quickly things came apart in 2008 because of my job. And I could see that Bush had to take action, and a delay of even a month of no action or just stupidity could have just really caused an epic collapse. So, and that might be enough to bring people together to force him out. But yeah, he's setting up for bad stuff. And the groundwork had been laid. I mean, even the anniversary of his election, I knew somebody, because they were rumors that the Antifa was going to attack establishments to protest the election a year earlier. And I know somebody who actually, he lives in the Los Angeles area, but outside of Los Angeles. He's like, I've got my gun, I'm ready. And I was like, what are you talking about? But he and I said, are you kidding? And he goes, no, I'm ready. Just in case, it won't hurt. And so these people it's been over years, but they're really primed to accept they may need to fight. I've got a Pat Robertson video saying that from 2017, they hadn't quite realized that Trump was their president. And he's talking about how they might have to take up arms against the left to save the country. This is 2017.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's scary. That's scary stuff.
Yeah, so this is not, this soil's been cultivated, it's been fertilized, and now Trump's doing this. So.
Yeah, I think Trump is too arrogant to resign, but I think you might be right if he's fearful of some kind of prosecution from some of his past crimes. People are going to now push for something like that. He could do some kind of a plea deal where that's part of it. That would be the only way I could see him resigning, because otherwise he's just too cocky and arrogant to do that.
I wonder
I'm old enough to.
How
Go ahead, Phil.
I wonder how significant the arrogance is. I look at Muammar Gaddafi as sort of a psychological example of an extreme narcissist who, in the end, is most interested in saving his own skin.
Yes.
Mugabe.
And in Trump's case, it would also be to save the ability to make money and form some sort of legacy. But So I'm not sure if I would ever expect him to resign. What he should do, frankly, when we get closer, if the polls are as spread as they are now and stay there, is leave the country. and that
tell you what.
And that would escape being able to be prosecuted.
Oh yeah.
So that's a possibility.
Yeah.
You can go to Russia. But you know, the
Andreas, go ahead. Yeah.
I'm old enough that my first kind of the age of when I started getting conscious of political matters was Tricky Dicky. And ultimately it was Tricky Dicky, it was the Republicans who told, in the back room, who told Nixon, look, you're done. But there's just no scenario in which that could happen now, because they're all just so toadies, such toadies of Trump. They're so intimidated by him that it's inconceivable that anything like that would ever happen.
Yeah, it's hard to say which way.
I see him going down in smoke, if he refuses to leave,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to say, but I can see both scenarios. Lisa, go ahead.
So I think just two things. First of all, going back to my scenario, it really kind of is informed by the fact that when he was in bankruptcy and his back was against the wall, he told the banks he would take them down if they took him down. And so that really, I think, is a really big kind of a good thing to kind of inform or think about how we approach what could happen. Because I laid out one scenario, where we have to get him out of office so bad because the economy's collapsing and it can't wait for him to leave office normally. And he might do that again if he gets his own way, and it will require Democratic support because it may require that all state and federal charges of everything be dropped. Right. Or something like that. So it would be a big, big deal.
Yeah.
But I think he would get so much out of it, to Andres's point, that it would be worth it to him because he wants to, and Phil's point, because he wants to preserve his legacy and protect himself, right? He could care less about the economy, but it gives him the get out of jail free card. So I think that's the thing.
Yeah. I still want to encourage him to leave the country because in terms of avoiding prosecution, there's everything that he did that there is good evidence for that came before he was in office, and that still sits.
Yeah.
So
that might be part of the deal to get him out of jail free.
I don't know.
As far as including that, but I think here's the deal. I wrote something on Medium about this. I said that he should be required to leave the country, to your point, because I think it's important he leaves the country and renounces citizenship and never enter the United States again, number one. Number two, if by any chance he thinks to protect his kids likewise would also be required to leave the country, and everybody protected under this agreement. If you've ever read anything John Jr.'s been writing, you'll realize he's as toxic as his dad or worse. So they would be required to leave the country too. And all of them would have to refrain from interference in US politics or discussing US politics. And the agreement would become null and void as far as their immunity if they do enter the US political arena or discuss it publicly.
Wow.
So those were like the 3 points that should be contingent. If it gets to this like critical stage, he has to leave, because to your point, I think it's important he gets out.
Is that even legally possible? That's what I'm wondering.
Well, I think
what would happen to his company?
As duress on everybody's part. It could be contested as being under duress on everybody's part.
I think it's very possible that he could try to leave the country, but I don't want that to happen because I want him to be prosecuted. I think his attempt to move to Florida and establish domicile there was an attempt to escape jurisdiction in New York, where he's facing state charges.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that anybody that wanting or him to go or not is an issue. I'm just suggesting that his best legal shield is to get away from American jurisdiction and not come back, kind of like Roman Polanski did, and live out his life there. I mean, he still has his income. He has availability in terms of getting his real estate transactions funded through the money laundering pipe that he had before. So he can operate, make the same profits that he's made all these years outside of legal. All that exists for him as long as he just stays away from being legally captured.
But if he leaves the country, he should, right? The government should seize all of his assets.
That's true. They would, but
I mean, he should.
You know,
he should not have the right to profit from any of his business.
He can move on and do business out of the United States. It won't matter.
Yeah, he can appoint somebody.
He will never face jail. He will never face a court.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying. To me, it looks like his best escape hatch.
I think there's going to be an inner conflict between different facets of a narcissism, namely that a rift between his political ego and that of his creature comfort ego, i.e. survival ego, and that which has most cathected his ego will win out.
Yeah.
I'm concerned that with the mail-in voting, I've read a few articles, we're not going to get the results right away like we do on the other election nights. It's going to take days, maybe even weeks, and in between that time, is he going to declare the election null and void, or is he going to try and delay the election? And I think one thing to be aware of is that he has followed through on a lot of his threats. And when he says he wants to do something, he wants to do it, and he will do it if given the opportunity to do it. So,
he can't legally delay. It requires a congressional act, and it requires House and Senate.
Well, he can't legally
off the right to delay an election.
I mean, already the Republicans have spoken up against that, but it doesn't matter because, like I said, the House won't allow it. And if one of the two,
I mean, he can contest the results legally, but then they'll just do a recount and it'll come up with the same result. So
yeah, but if there is no election, the I forget if it's the Constitution or how it's interpreted, is you don't have to have an election for the last period to end. The wording is such that the term ends, period. So if there is a debated result, what happens is his term ends, Pence's term ends, Pelosi's term ends. I believe she's up also, and then you go into the line of succession, and or Congress making the determination of putting somebody in temporarily or whatever. So
the president of the Senate would take office. The president.
So this is why it's most important right now. I don't know that level of detail, but I know it's important for that reason for the Democrats to take the Senate. Say again, Andreas.
The president of the Senate, the tiebreaker in the Senate is a vice president.
No, that's true, but Pence's
term
office ends.
No, I'm just saying
at the same time. So yeah, once Trump's first term is done, Pence's first term is also done. So Pence is no longer the tiebreaker in the Senate.
But then
that seat is vacated.
Speaker of the House.
Pelosi's term is also ending. So it may go to the new incoming Speaker of the House, and that's going to depend on which party wins, right? And then the party has to nominate, I guess. So again, what you don't want is McConnell being in charge of that process. So, and this is why we're seeing, currently I saw a five-time fundraising matching on McConnell's election to defeat him. At the same time, on the Republican side, they have just announced that the Kentucky polling places have been reduced by 95%. So,
yeah. Now, and the other thing is that I'm not sure that Trump is going to comply with the law. I mean, we say he can't do something, but if he's got the guns, he can do whatever he wants. And he's already defied the Supreme Court just recently, showing, and he's been defying the court for a while already, but this is the real official one with the DACA. I don't think there's necessarily going to be a restraint on him, because every constitutional restraint that we've thrown at him, maybe he complies voluntarily, but at some point when he decides he's not going to comply anymore, what is he going to do? And what is he going to be able to get away with if he has troops in the streets, no election, and no voting count of the election, and then he declare the election null and void and take over the country?
Well, you have to look at the history of how coups operate. Basically, it is what the military does, and where they follow. So
but
the military,
but the military will not necessarily support him. There's already been assigned. The leaders of the military are not inside.
Yeah, I personally doubt that they would, but that's what it comes to be a question. He will no longer legally be the commander-in-chief, so it would be it'd be outside the Constitution for military leaders to follow his orders at that point.
Well, I'll keep my fingers crossed.
Yes, yeah. And stay inside.
Can you imagine we're talking about military coups? I mean, unbelievable. And like Rich goes back to Rich's point, just because he can't do something, just because, being circumscribed by the Constitution never deterred him, never has. We look at his track record, and here we are talking about coups. I mean, that's crazy shit.
Yeah. Rich's point, we can't, we default, like normal people default to this, he shouldn't or he can't or he won't. Realistically, he's going to do whatever he wants, and there has to be a way of literally stopping him. So the Constitution won't, laws won't. So what is the mechanism that will stop him? And, we go to the military, we hope that their lack of support might do it.
The FBI.
But do they stand on the sidelines, or do they actually help enforce the Constitution? And he's been purging military leadership at a pretty good clip. So, pardon me?
What's that, Andreas?
Take him out.
Yeah, it's scary. It's definitely scary.
No.
Yeah, we don't want that, actually.
This is United States. We are not going to drop that.
Well, it looks like we're going to get 2 podcasts out of this.
Oh.
All right.
All right.
Well, cool.
I'm gonna go, people. I'm hungry.
Yeah. I'm gonna go
Thanks,
get a
Rich.
late dinner here. Yeah. Thanks, Rich. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, everybody for hanging out.
All right. Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Rich.
Yeah, that's a great discussion. Thank you, Rich.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mark.
Yes, thank you very much. Enjoyed it.
Thank you, Rich,
All right, thank you, Andres.
for facilitating.
Yeah,
You're
thanks,
welcome.
everybody.
Thank you. Thank you,
Save the
everybody.
chat real quick.
Thanks, Brett, for doing it.
Okay. You're welcome. All right. I'm ending it. You ready?
Okay, yeah, go for it. 3, 2, 1.